Right on. Hey everybody, this is Perry with Premier Guitar. Today we're talking to Doug from IsoAcoustics. How's it going, Doug? Thanks for the awesome play-in.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Right on, man. So Doug's in California right now, and obviously because of COVID, I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee. But he wanted to show us some new stuff. So what do you guys got going on?
Okay, this is the IsoAcoustics Stage 1 board. And you can kind of see behind me, there's a bevy of amplifiers. I kind of have the first version there. This is a new version that actually has the isolating pucks built into the board. $99 map. Boy, I'm going right into show mode, aren't I? So we've done like 5 million amp shows together collectively with Premier Guitar and all the folks. So, but these are awesome. And should I continue?
Well, let me ask a question. So
Yes.
is this something similar to like what you would put under a studio monitor?
So the great story about this is absolutely, and I will continue with that great lead-in.
Okay.
Without mentioning the last name, there was a famous guitar player's tech who came by the IsoAcoustics booth at NAMM. His first name is John. We'll leave it there. And they were having a problem, and you would know because I can see the vintage, Fender style guitars, whether it's a custom shop, whatever. If you put a vintage Fender amp or a reverb style amplifier on a loud stage and you put it down on the stage, it's going to start to vibrate and the springs are going to start to go nuts. So the question was, can you do something like you're doing with the studio monitors for guitar amps? And Dave went, yeah. So the impetus behind this was basically Dave used to work at the, I think it's the CBC, the founder of the company, Dave Morrison, and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, I think. And they had this building that was basically right next to the tramway or whatever. So they had to isolate the buildings. So that was kind of where this whole thing came from. The isolators, as you kind of alluded to, are basically in every major studio in the world. If you can think of your favorite records, if those studios are still open, the isolators are there. Whether it's a home studio, pretty much everybody uses Dave stands because they're the best in the market.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, like personally here at my house, you might even hear it. I have a giant train that goes through, and you can hear my amps rattling when it goes through, just all kinds of weird stuff. So that's a pretty good idea. So let me ask you something. Is this just one size? Is it made for just combo amps?
That is a great question. Boy, you're good. It is currently available in one size that is 25 by 10 and 1.85 inches off the ground.
Gotcha. So that'll fit pretty much any combo amp.
It'll fit any combo. And yes.
Yeah. Man, that's a pretty cool thing because I've been on some pretty shaky stages where, if you step around your amp and it's moving the whole thing. So I guess that could help with that as well. That's pretty cool.
Ginormously. And actually, if you look at the amp rack behind me, you've probably seen something like that at like Home Depot or Costco somewhere. And basically, those are wire shelves that I had plywood cut for and placed on the shelf. So it's basically like a giant snare drum. Like if I were to go back there and bang on that. So the idea is I'm creating an isolated environment. The very short version in guitar player speak is that, if you put your guitar headstock up against the wall, we've all done this, right? Especially on like a sheetrock wall, and all of a sudden you hear the wall become your speaker. Right. But you can also feel that vibration make its way back into the guitar. So the thing about that is that reflection happens in both directions, and although I'm not an expert on phase and time alignment, when that same frequency starts coming back into your enclosure, you're going to get some phase cancellation. And, mind you, we've been playing on stages and we've been dealing with this for a long time, but there are guys like Steve Vai and Eric Johnson that are using these, as well as the Tedeschi Trucks Band, specifically to go, hey, I spent a lot of money on my gear. I want it to sound the way it sounds from night to night and room to room. So what you were hearing there at the top is a 64 Vibroverb, which is kind of like my crown jewel amplifier. So I wanted to give you guys something special. And that amp to me, and I learned this from RJ Ronquillo, it's just the greatest little trick is if you use a shotgun. So the thing is that, I'm capturing the sound in the room, which is ultimately the vibe. And if your amp sounds like it's on a giant snare drum, or, it's different if you put it down on a concrete floor and then you put it up on top of, for example, a road case, which is again a giant snare drum, or a tom-tom, your amp's not going to respond the same, right?
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Wow, well, that's a pretty cool little invention there. So are these available now, or when do you start shipping?
They are available now.
Awesome. And then what's the street price for these?
$99 map.
Totally reasonable. Wow.
And the first version of these actually, so these are kind of the standalone pucks. Uh-huh. So I basically, as you might imagine, I have various IsoAcoustic products underneath all my studio monitors. And then they make a smaller one that's underneath some small studio monitors that I use. Again, you're a video guy, so you know what it's like. If you're going to, quote unquote, master audio for the web, you want to do it on a small speaker. So PreSonus has these Aris 3.5s that are perfect for seeing what something's going to sound like on the web, or at least beginning to imagine what it's going to sound like. So they have a smaller version of the pucks. These are the large ones. So basically, these are what's underneath here, but it's actually a slightly smaller version, and it's been customized so it'll float a little bit. There we go. It floats around a little bit, and it's built into the board. The very first version, you would basically mount them yourself. By being able to include them in the board themselves, you basically pull it out of the box and it's good to go. And this one just arrived. So I've got the version 1. These are the version 2s, and this is what's shipping now. And, they've got a little handle. It's kind of like a Steve Vai thing for boards. And, the funny thing, and there's also a kind of an anti-slip little thing that goes on there, because some amps, like you look like a Fender guy. Those little metal feet, those suckers like to move around.
Yeah, they do. They like to scratch stuff up as well. Yeah, cool. So is that, I'm guessing it's a foam, almost like, just like you would put under a studio monitor?
So these guys are so the pucks themselves are kind of some brilliant combination of isolating, reflexive. The short version that Dave can tell a lot better is that you actually want some give in the surface underneath, but you do not necessarily want, without kicking sand on anybody, something that gives too much. That is to say, because again, if you think about the guitar up against the sheetrock wall, and then you imagine against a carpeted wall in your studio, think about the difference of the way that energy is conducted and potentially reflected back. So the idea is that as the speaker moves, you actually want to have some responsiveness such that, again, and I was hanging out with a guy named Jeff Slingluff, who you probably know from Boss, right? Everybody knows Jeff. So the thing is he was talking about this phase alignment with a speaker. So if a speaker is supposed to be going forwards but is going backwards, by that same amount, it will cancel itself out. So it means your tone is gone. Right. So that phasing effect that you can get if the amp is actually trying to do its thing, but a previous signal is making its way back up into the enclosure, and the speaker is going to respond to that because it's going to be moved just in the same way that the stage can move your amp and rattle your reverb. That has an effect on the speaker, and Dave from IsoAcoustics, the founder, calls that smear. And I will go a step further. We have a bunch of photos, one of which is of I work with Dreamcatcher events, so we do the Vai, Satriani, Petrucci, Tom Morello guitar camp. So one of the things, I brought some of these out there because Steve is using these in his studio, and then I was asked to bring these out so they can be underneath the monitors for Steve's fallback, and they're literally under the monitors on top of road cases. Like the word, it's a setup, tear down stage. So it's everything you could never want in a sound situation, to be able to go from your studio to a situation that you want to have continuity in your sound. So what's neat about this is it allows you to isolate your stage monitors. So that's how Eric Johnson is using them live. And we all know that Eric Johnson, when it comes to tone, first of all, total tone off his Leonardo, he's not going to use anything that doesn't make it better. And so the consistency of that fallback experience is really important. Just in the same way, it's, again, going back to your original question, you're recreating that near-field monitor isolation experience that we have to have in the studio in a live environment. So you totally nailed it.
Right. So I'm guessing front of house guys love these things, huh?
Well, and that's exactly kind of how the Tedeschi Trucks thing actually happens. So they're, dude, you're good. So that's exactly what happened. So he'd been using them in the studio and went, do you have some boards you can send out? And so basically, I think it's a 13-piece band. So can you imagine the amount of noise, because they're on fallback monitors, which I love, by the way.
Right.
I actually like to hear the air moving. I'm old school. What can I say? But they've got a ton of monitors on the stage, which means there's a ton of volume coming off the monitors, which means if the stage is introducing smear into those monitors, that is making its way into the musicians' mixes. It's making its way into the musician's ability to hear their part clearly, to hear the part they're harmonizing with clearly, and their ability to do the job. And that ultimately compromises, as you pointed out, the front of house's guy ability to get a great sounding mix, because you've also now got all this noise coming off stage that instead of being clear, has got this smear in it, and that does make its way also into the vocal mics.
What's the website where people can learn more about it?
You can go to ISO Acoustics, like it sounds, with an S on the end, IsoAcoustics.com. And you can get to dealers there, and it's got all the information you want to know, not only about the Stage 1 boards, but also all the other really awesome products.
That's awesome. Well, Doug, I'm going to have you play us out in just a second. Guys, this is Perry with Premier Guitar. Stay tuned for more Summer Gear Slam videos and rig rundowns, riff rundowns, all that stuff. You know the drill. Thanks a lot. See you guys later.
Perry, thanks so much.